You know that feeling when you are holding the most precious secret in the world. That was me 3 months ago, when I found out I was pregnant with my first child. My husband Jake and I had been trying for over a year, and when those two pink lines finally appeared, I thought my heart might burst with joy. We were living in our little dream home in the suburbs of Dallas, and everything felt perfect. But when we announced the news to his family that Saturday evening, I noticed something strange in my sister-in-law Madison's eyes. While everyone else was celebrating, she had this cold, calculating look that made my skin crawl. Her smile was forced, her congratulations felt hollow, and I could not shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I had no idea that Madison was already plotting a cruel plan that would turn my husband's birthday party into the worst nightmare of my life. Before I continue this story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please drop your city in the comments below, and do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more shocking stories like this one. Trust me, what happened next will make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty, because sometimes the people closest to you can be the most dangerous. The dynamics in Jake's family had always been complicated, but I thought I understood them well enough after 2 years of marriage. Jake and I had bought our house just 6 months earlier, a charming 3-bedroom colonial with a white picket fence that screamed, "Suburban Dream." I worked as a marketing executive for a tech startup downtown, and Jake was an engineer at a manufacturing company. We were doing well, building our life together brick by brick. Madison, on the other hand, had always been the golden child of the family. She had married Jake's older brother Derek 5 years ago, and had given his parents their first two grandchildren, Emma, who was 4, and little Tommy, who was 2. Madison never let anyone forget that she had been the first to make their parents grandparents, and she wore that crown with pride. She was always perfectly put together, always had the right thing to say, and somehow managed to make every family gathering revolve around her and her children. I had always felt like an outsider looking in when it came to Madison. She never directly said anything rude to me, but there were little comments here and there, subtle digs about how I was too focused on my career or how I dressed too formally for family dinners. Jake never seemed to notice, and I did not want to cause problems by bringing it up. Madison had a way of making her criticisms sound like concern, so calling her out would have made me look petty. The night we announced our pregnancy will forever be etched in my memory. We had gathered at Jake's parents' house for Sunday dinner, which was a weekly tradition. The whole family was there, his parents Robert and Linda Derrick, and Madison with their kids and us. I had been feeling nauseous all week, but I managed to get through dinner without anyone noticing. When dessert was served, Jake stood up and cleared his throat. "Linda and Robert Derrick and Madison, we have some exciting news to share with everyone." I stood up beside him, my hand instinctively moving to my still flat stomach. "We are having a baby," Jake announced with the biggest smile I had ever seen on his face. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Linda burst into tears of joy and rushed over to hug both of us. Robert pumped Jake's hand and kept saying, "Congratulations, son," over and over. Derek clapped Jake on the back and gave me a warm hug, genuinely happy for us. Emma and Tommy did not really understand what was happening, but they got caught up in the excitement anyway. But Madison's reaction was completely different. Her face went pale, and for just a moment I saw something flash in her eyes that looked almost like anger. She bit her lower lip so hard I thought she might draw blood, and when she finally spoke, the word "congratulations" came out through gritted teeth, like it physically pained her to say it. Derek was too busy corralling the kids to notice his wife's reaction, but I saw it clearly. Later that evening, after we had driven home, I could not stop thinking about Madison's expression. Jake was over the moon, talking excitedly about converting the spare bedroom into a nursery and all the things we needed to buy. I tried to match his enthusiasm, but Madison's face kept flashing in my mind. I told myself I was being paranoid, that pregnancy hormones were making me overly sensitive. The week following our announcement was when the strange behavior really began. Madison called me on Tuesday morning, which was unusual because we rarely spoke directly to each other outside of family gatherings. Her voice was overly sweet, almost saccharine, as she asked about how I was feeling and if I was experiencing morning sickness. She wanted to know all the details about my doctor's appointments and when we planned to find out the gender. Then she casually brought up Jake's birthday party, which was scheduled for the following Saturday at our house. "I was thinking," she said, "since you are probably tired from the pregnancy, maybe I could help with the party planning. I would love to make the dessert. You know how much Jake loves my chocolate cake." I was actually relieved by the offer, because the morning sickness had been hitting me hard, and the thought of baking a cake while fighting nausea was not appealing. "That would be wonderful, Madison. Thank you for thinking of that." But even as I said it, something felt off about her eagerness to help. Over the next few days, Madison texted me constantly about the party details. She wanted to know exactly who was invited, what time people were arriving, what I was planning to serve for dinner, and even what I was planning to wear. Her level of interest seemed excessive, but I chalked it up to her perfectionist personality. Madison always needed to know every detail of every event. Jake was thrilled that his sister was taking such an interest in his birthday celebration. "See, I told you Madison really cares about you," he said when I mentioned all her texts. "She is just excited to help with the party." I wanted to believe him, but my intuition kept telling me that something was not right. The morning of the party, I was up at 6 in the morning despite feeling queasy. I wanted everything to be perfect for Jake's 32nd birthday. I spent hours preparing his favorite foods: barbecue ribs, corn on the cob coleslaw, and baked beans. The house smelled amazing, and I had decorated the living room and backyard with blue and silver streamers, Jake's favorite colors. Madison arrived at 2 in the afternoon, 3 hours before the party was supposed to start, carrying a beautiful 3-layer chocolate cake. It was decorated with elegant white frosting and looked absolutely professional. "Wow, Madison, this is gorgeous," I said, as she carried it into the kitchen. "Thank you so much for making this." "It was my pleasure," she replied, but there was something in her tone that made me look at her more carefully. "I will just put this in the refrigerator to keep it fresh. Do not worry about it at all." She placed the cake on the bottom shelf and closed the door quickly, almost protectively. What struck me as odd was how she positioned herself between me and the refrigerator for the rest of the afternoon. Every time I went to get something from the fridge, she would suddenly appear and ask if she could help me find what I needed. When Jake's mother arrived and wanted to peek at the cake, Madison quickly distracted her with questions about the grandchildren. By 5 o'clock, our backyard was filled with about 25 people: family members, Jake's co-workers, our neighbors, and several close friends. The weather was perfect, with a gentle breeze and golden sunlight filtering through the trees. Everyone was in a great mood, and I was starting to relax and enjoy the party despite my lingering unease about Madison's behavior. Jake was having the time of his life, moving from group to group, laughing and catching up with people he had not seen in months. Several people commented on how happy he looked, and more than a few offered their congratulations about the baby. I felt that warm glow that comes with seeing someone you love surrounded by people who care about them. But I could not stop noticing Madison. While she appeared to be socializing normally with the other guests, I caught her watching me constantly. Whenever I looked in her direction, she would quickly look away or start an animated conversation with whoever was nearby. She also seemed to be keeping track of my movements, especially when I went anywhere near the kitchen. Around 6:30, I needed to use the bathroom, which was located down the hallway past the kitchen. As I was walking back toward the party, I heard Madison's voice coming from the kitchen. She was on her phone, speaking in a low, urgent tone that made me pause outside the doorway. "Everything is ready," she was saying. "She will not know what hit her. By tonight, everyone will see her true colors. Trust me, after this, Jake will finally understand what kind of person he really married." My blood ran cold. Madison was talking about me, that much was clear, but I could not understand what she meant. What was ready? What was she planning to do? My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I pressed myself against the wall trying to hear more, but Madison had lowered her voice even further. "I have to go," she said. "People are starting to wonder where I am. But everything is set up perfectly. She has no idea what is coming." I heard her footsteps approaching the doorway, and I quickly hurried back toward the party, my mind racing. What kind of plan could Madison have that would make everyone see my true colors? What did she mean when she said everything was set up perfectly? I felt sick, and not just from the morning sickness. When I returned to the backyard, Jake immediately noticed something was wrong. "Hey babe, you look pale. Are you feeling okay?" he asked, wrapping his arm around my waist protectively. I forced a smile. "I am fine, just a little tired. The heat is getting to me." I could not tell him what I had overheard, not in the middle of his birthday party with all these people around. Besides, I did not have any concrete evidence of what Madison was planning, just an overheard phone conversation that could be interpreted different ways. As the evening progressed, more guests arrived and the party moved into full swing. Someone had brought a guitar, and a group was singing classic rock songs near the deck. The smell of barbecue filled the air, and everyone seemed to be having a wonderful time. Under different circumstances, it would have been the perfect birthday celebration. Around 8 o'clock, Madison announced that it was time for cake. She disappeared into the kitchen and emerged a few minutes later, carrying the beautiful chocolate creation she had made. The crowd gathered around as she placed it on the outdoor table we had set up for dessert. "I wanted to make something extra special for Jake's birthday," Madison announced to the group, her voice carrying clearly across the backyard. "Especially since this is such a meaningful time for him and Miriam with the baby coming." The cake was even more beautiful than I had remembered, with elegant script writing that read, "Happy birthday, Jake, and welcome, baby," in white frosting. The crowd oohed and awed over the cake, and several people complimented Madison on her baking skills. Jake looked genuinely touched by the gesture. "Madison, this is incredible. Thank you so much for putting so much thought into this." "It was my pleasure," Madison replied, but I noticed she was looking at me rather than Jake when she said it. I think it is only fitting that Jake and Miriam cut the first piece together, since they are celebrating 2 occasions tonight. Something about the way she said it made my stomach clench. Jake took my hand and led me to the table where Madison had placed 2 cake knives. "Ready to cut into this masterpiece?" he asked, smiling at me with such love and happiness that my heart ached. "Ready," I replied, though I was anything but. Together, Jake and I positioned the knife over the cake. The crowd had gathered around us, phones out to capture the moment. Madison stood directly across from us, watching intently with an expression I could not quite read. As we pressed the knife down into the cake, I felt like everything was moving in slow motion. The knife met resistance almost immediately, as if there was something hard inside the cake. Jake pushed down harder, and suddenly the most horrific smell I have ever encountered in my life erupted from inside the cake. It was the smell of rotting fish mixed with something else equally disgusting, and it hit everyone in the immediate area like a physical blow. People started gagging and backing away from the table. Someone screamed. Jake dropped the knife and stumbled backward, his hand over his mouth. I just stood there, frozen in shock and horror, as the terrible smell continued to pour out of the ruined cake. "Oh my God, Miriam!" Madison's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "What did you do?" The aftermath of that moment was like watching a nightmare unfold in real time. The beautiful cake that Madison had seemingly spent hours creating was now split open, revealing layers of rotting fish paste mixed with what looked like spoiled cottage cheese. The smell was so overwhelming that several people had to run to the far end of the yard to avoid vomiting. Madison immediately launched into the performance she had clearly been rehearsing. "I cannot believe you would do something like this," she shouted, pointing an accusing finger directly at me. Her voice was loud enough for everyone at the party to hear clearly. "I worked for hours on that cake. I made it with love for Jake's birthday, and you destroyed it." I stood there in complete shock, unable to form words. The smell from the ruined cake was making my pregnancy nausea 10 times worse, and I felt like I might pass out. "Madison, I did not do anything to your cake," I managed to say, but my voice sounded weak and unconvincing even to my own ears. "Do not lie to me," Madison continued now with tears streaming down her face. "I know you have never liked me, but I never thought you would stoop this low. And you are pregnant. How could you risk making everyone sick like this?" She turned to address the stunned crowd. "I made this cake yesterday and stored it in my refrigerator overnight. It was perfect when I brought it here. The only time it was out of my sight was when I left it in Miriam's kitchen." The guests were looking back and forth between Madison and me like they were watching a tennis match. I could see confusion and concern on their faces. Some of them were starting to look at me with suspicion, wondering if Madison's accusations could possibly be true. Jake looked like he had been hit by a truck. "Miriam, what is going on? Did something happen to the cake?" he asked, and the hurt in his voice was almost worse than Madison's accusations. "Jake, I swear to you, I had nothing to do with this," I said, reaching out to touch his arm. "I never went near that cake except to help Madison put it in the refrigerator when she arrived." Madison sobbed louder. "She is lying. She must have done something to it when I was not watching. Maybe she was jealous that I made such a beautiful cake, and she could not because of her morning sickness. I should have known better than to trust her with something so important." Derek, who had been trying to calm down their children, who were scared by all the shouting, finally stepped forward. "Madison, calm down. Let us try to figure out what happened here." But even he looked uncertain, glancing between his wife and me with confusion. "What is there to figure out?" Madison snapped. "She sabotaged my cake. Look at it. You can see that someone deliberately put those disgusting things inside it. Cakes do not just spontaneously fill themselves with rotten fish." That was when something clicked in my brain. Madison was right about one thing. Cakes do not just spontaneously fill themselves with rotten fish. Someone had to have deliberately put those things inside the cake, but it was not me. And suddenly I remembered something that made my heart race with a mixture of hope and fear. 3 weeks ago, Jake had surprised me by having a Ring doorbell camera system installed while I was at work. He wanted us to feel more secure in our new neighborhood, and the system included cameras that covered both our front door and our back patio area. More importantly, one of the cameras had a clear view of our kitchen window. "Wait," I said loudly, interrupting Madison's continued tirade. "Everyone needs to stop for a minute. I can prove that I did not do this." Madison's face went pale, but she quickly recovered. "How could you possibly prove that there is no one here who can vouch for you being away from that cake the entire time?" "Actually, there is someone who can vouch for me," I replied, pulling my phone out of my pocket. "Our security camera system records everything that happens in and around our house." The change in Madison's expression was immediate and dramatic. The color drained from her face completely, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she seemed to be at a loss for words. "The kitchen window is clearly visible from our back patio camera." I continued, my fingers shaking as I opened the security app on my phone. If I did something to that cake, it will be recorded. And if I did not do anything to that cake, that will be recorded too. Jake moved closer to me, his expression shifting from confusion to hope. "Miriam, if you have video evidence, let us see it right now." I quickly navigated to the camera footage from earlier that afternoon and found the timestamp from when Madison had arrived with the cake. "Here," I said, turning my phone screen toward Jake. "This shows Madison putting the cake in the refrigerator at 2:15 this afternoon." I fast-forwarded through the footage, showing the kitchen window clearly visible in the frame. For the next hour, the kitchen was empty, except for brief moments when I entered to get ice or drinks for guests. At no point did the video show me going near the refrigerator for more than a few seconds. But then at 3:45, the camera captured something that made everyone gasp. Madison entered the kitchen alone, looked around quickly to make sure no one was watching, and opened the refrigerator. She pulled out a large Ziploc bag from her purse and spent several minutes doing something to the cake that was not clearly visible from the camera angle. The video showed Madison working on the cake for nearly 10 minutes, occasionally glancing toward the kitchen doorway to make sure she was not being observed. When she was finished, she carefully closed the cake box, put it back in the refrigerator, and threw the empty Ziploc bag in our trash can underneath the sink. The backyard had gone completely silent, except for the sound of children playing in the distance, unaware of the adult drama unfolding. Madison stood frozen, staring at my phone screen like she was looking at her own execution warrant. "Madison," Derek said quietly, his voice filled with disbelief and hurt. "Please tell me you did not actually plan this." But Madison's composure had completely crumbled. She started crying again, but these were not the performative tears from before. These were tears of shame and defeat. "You do not understand," she sobbed. "She was supposed to be the one who got embarrassed tonight. Everyone was supposed to see what kind of person she really is." The confession hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Jake stared at his sister with an expression of complete betrayal and disgust. "Madison, how could you do something like this? This is my wife. She is carrying your niece or nephew. Because she took everything away from me." Madison screamed, her carefully constructed facade finally falling away completely. "I was the first one to give Mom and Dad grandchildren. I was the one who made all the holidays special. I was the center of this family. And then she came along and suddenly everything became about her and her perfect career and her perfect house, and now her perfect pregnancy." Derek looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. Several of the party guests had started quietly gathering their things and leaving clearly uncomfortable with being witnesses to such a private family meltdown. Others remained too shocked to move. In the aftermath of Madison's confession, I made a decision that would change everything. While my initial instinct was to just ask everyone to leave and try to forget this nightmare had ever happened, my growing maternal instincts kicked in. This was not just about me anymore. I was carrying a child who deserved to grow up in a family free from this kind of toxic manipulation. The next morning, while Jake was still processing what his sister had done, I called in sick to work and spent the morning researching food tampering laws in Texas. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Madison had not just played a cruel prank. She had potentially committed a felony. Intentionally contaminating food with the intent to cause illness or distress was a serious crime, and the fact that she had done it to a pregnant woman could be considered an aggravating factor. I also researched harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The more I read, the more I realized that Madison's behavior went far beyond a simple family squabble. She had deliberately planned and executed an attack designed to humiliate me and potentially damage my reputation in front of family and friends. That afternoon, I drove to a law office downtown and met with an attorney named Sarah Chen, who specialized in both criminal and civil harassment cases. I brought the security camera footage screenshots of Madison's excessive texting before the party and a detailed timeline of events. Sarah listened carefully and took extensive notes. "Mrs. Johnson," Sarah said when I finished my account, "what happened to you was not just morally wrong, it was legally actionable. Food tampering is a third-degree felony in Texas, punishable by up to 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. Given that you are pregnant, and that this was clearly premeditated, a prosecutor would likely take this case very seriously." I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Part of me wanted justice, but another part of me worried about the impact this would have on Jake and the rest of his family. What would happen if I decided to press charges? First, I would recommend filing for a protective order to prevent any further contact or harassment from Madison. Then we would file a police report with the evidence you have collected. The district attorney's office would review the case and decide whether to pursue criminal charges. Separately, we could also file a civil lawsuit for emotional distress invasion of privacy and any other damages you suffered as a result of her actions. When I got home that evening, Jake was sitting at our kitchen table staring at his phone. "Madison has been texting me all day," he said without looking up. "She wants to come over and explain her side of the story. She thinks I am overreacting." That was when I told Jake about my meeting with the attorney and what I had learned about food tampering laws. His face went white when I explained that Madison could potentially face felony charges. "Miriam, I know what she did was awful, but is involving the police really necessary? She is Derek's wife, and she is the mother of Emma and Tommy. If she goes to jail, it will destroy their family." I understood Jake's reluctance. Madison was his sister, and despite what she had done, he still loved her. But I also knew that if we let this slide, Madison would never face any real consequences for her actions. "Jake, she did not just embarrass me at a party. She planned this for days, maybe weeks. She wanted to destroy my reputation and possibly make people think I was an unfit mother before our baby is even born. What happens next time when she thinks I have crossed some imaginary line?" It took Jake 2 days to come to terms with what we needed to do, but eventually he agreed that pressing charges was the right decision. The next morning we went to the police station together and filed a formal complaint against Madison for food tampering and harassment. The investigation moved quickly because we had such clear evidence. The security camera footage was damning, and when the police searched our trash can, they found the Ziploc bag Madison had thrown away, which still contained traces of the rotten fish paste she had used to sabotage the cake. But Madison was not content to accept responsibility quietly. In the days following the police report, she launched a social media campaign against me that was even more vicious than her cake sabotage. She posted on Facebook claiming that I was a manipulative narcissist who was tearing the family apart with false accusations. She shared twisted versions of family events, painting me as someone who had always been jealous of her and was now using my pregnancy to play the victim. Madison claimed that the security camera footage was somehow doctored or taken out of context. She insisted that she had only gone into the kitchen to fix something that I had already done to the cake. According to her version of events, I had sabotaged my own cake and then framed her for it in order to get sympathy and attention. The posts were shared by some of her friends who did not know the full story, and soon I was receiving nasty messages from strangers who believed Madison's lies. Some people accused me of being a psycho pregnant woman who was destroying an innocent family. Others suggested that I was mentally unstable and should not be having children. Sarah Chen advised me to document all of Madison's social media posts and the harassment messages I was receiving. "This actually strengthens your case," she explained. "What she is doing now proves a pattern of deliberate harassment and shows that she has no remorse for her original actions." 2 weeks after we filed the police report, Madison was arrested at her workplace on charges of food tampering and cyberbullying. The arrest was particularly humiliating because it happened in front of her co-workers and clients at the real estate office where she worked. By the end of the day, everyone in her professional circle knew what she had done. The arrest also triggered consequences that Madison had not anticipated. Derek finally began to see the pattern of manipulative behavior that had been hidden beneath his wife's perfect exterior. He revealed to Jake that Madison had displayed similar jealousy and vindictive behavior toward his previous girlfriends, but he had always dismissed it as harmless female competition. I started thinking about all the times Madison had problems with women I dated. Derek confided to us one evening. There was always some drama, some reason why the relationship did not work out. I thought it was just bad luck, but now I am wondering if Madison was orchestrating problems behind the scenes. Derek also discovered that Madison had been tracking his social media activity and had even created fake accounts to spy on his ex-girlfriends years after he had stopped dating them. Her obsession with controlling the family dynamics went much deeper than any of us had realized. 3 months after Madison's arrest, Derek filed for divorce and requested full custody of Emma and Tommy. The criminal case and the evidence of Madison's manipulative behavior provided strong support for his custody petition. Madison's own social media posts were used against her to demonstrate that she was unstable and posed a potential threat to the children's well-being. Madison's life completely unraveled. She lost her real estate license due to the felony charges. Her reputation in the community was destroyed, and most of her friends distanced themselves once they learned the truth about what she had done. The woman who had once been the center of attention at every family gathering now found herself completely isolated. Meanwhile, my own healing process was gradual but steady. The first few weeks after the party were difficult because I kept replaying the events in my mind and wondering if there was something I could have done differently. I questioned whether I was overreacting by pressing charges, especially when I saw how much pain Derek and the children were experiencing. Jake and I started attending couples therapy to help us process the trauma and make sure it did not damage our relationship. Our therapist helped us understand that Madison's behavior was not a reflection of any failure on our part, but rather the result of deep-seated psychological issues that had probably existed long before I came into the picture. Healthy family relationships require boundaries, our therapist explained. What Madison did was a fundamental violation of those boundaries, and by holding her accountable, you are actually protecting your future family from further manipulation. As my pregnancy progressed, I found strength I did not know I possessed. The baby growing inside me became my motivation to create a safe, healthy environment for our child. I realized that being a good mother meant more than just providing love and care. It also meant protecting my family from people who wished us harm, even if those people were relatives. Jake completely cut off contact with Madison after her arrest, which was difficult for him but necessary for our family's well-being. His parents struggled with the situation at first, but they eventually came to understand that Madison's actions were inexcusable and that supporting Jake and me was their priority. When we held our baby shower 4 months later, it was a beautiful, peaceful celebration surrounded by people who genuinely loved and supported us. There was no drama, no hidden agendas, just pure joy and anticipation for the new life we were bringing into the world. The criminal case against Madison was resolved with a plea agreement. She pled guilty to food tampering and harassment charges and received 2 years of probation, mandatory anger management counseling, and had to pay restitution for our legal fees and therapy costs. She was also prohibited from contacting Jake, me, or our future child for the duration of her probation. Looking back on that nightmare now, 6 months later, and with our beautiful daughter sleeping peacefully in the nursery upstairs, I have learned some important lessons about family boundaries and standing up for what is right. I learned that sometimes people who smile to your face and claim to care about you are actually your biggest enemies. I learned that jealousy can drive people to do things that are so cruel and calculated that they defy understanding. But most importantly, I learned that I am stronger than I ever imagined I could be. For months I had tried to keep the peace and avoid conflict with Madison, thinking that being accommodating would eventually win her over. I realize now that some people interpret kindness as weakness and will continue to escalate their behavior until someone stops them. When Madison tried to humiliate me in front of my family and friends, she thought I would be too shocked and hurt to fight back effectively. She expected me to just accept her lies and manipulation because that is what I had always done in the past. What she did not expect was that becoming a mother had awakened something fierce and protective inside me that refused to back down. The best revenge, as it turned out, was not revenge at all. It was simply refusing to be a victim and insisting on accountability for her actions. Madison destroyed her own life with her jealousy and vindictiveness. All I did was make sure the truth came to light. Our daughter Emma Rose was born healthy and perfect 3 months ago. When I hold her in my arms, I feel proud that I created a world where she can grow up without fear of manipulation or emotional abuse from family members who are supposed to love and protect her. That little baby deserved a mother who would not back down when it came to protecting our family. Sometimes people ask me if I regret pressing charges against Madison or if I think I was too harsh. My answer is always the same: I would do it again in a heartbeat. Some battles are worth fighting, and protecting your family from toxic people is always one of them. Have you ever had to deal with a toxic family member who seemed determined to destroy your happiness? How did you handle it? And what advice would you give to others facing similar situations? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family drama justice and finding the strength to stand up for yourself. And do not forget to share this video with anyone who might need to hear this message about setting boundaries and protecting themselves from family manipulation. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I hope it helps someone else find the courage to protect their own family when the time comes. Wishing you all love, strength, and the wisdom to know when it is time to fight back.